Welcome back. In this lecture, we will discuss data privacy and security. As you embark on a career in machine learning, you are inevitably going to be handling large amounts of data. And in many applications, this data is going to be often linked to individual people. And associated in that data will be information about those people that we need to protect. Cybersecurity is a real problem and needs to be addressed through vigilance. In this lecture, we will discuss some of the basics of what happens in a data breach, as well as some of the regulations and laws concerning data privacy and security that you should be aware of. The idea here is not to make you a cybersecurity expert in this lesson, but rather have you be aware of when you're starting to deal with data that has implications for privacy and security, and to think about, okay, are there cybersecurity controls in place? The discussion of the actual controls are beyond the scope of this course. So here is the lesson objectives. Okay, so as an example, Office of Personnel Management, we have this government building here in DC. This is the organization that provides human resources services for the federal U.S. government. And from 2013 to 2015, they suffered a series of data breaches. This graphic taken from The Atlantic shows a timeline of when those breaches happened, both when the breaches were initiated and someone started exfiltrating data, and then when they were actually discovered. So we see that the size of the breach is also represented by the size of the rectangle. This big one here was the largest breach of OPM during that time, where over 21 million records were stolen, and it is believed to have been done by a foreign government adversary of the United States. But interesting look at the timeline. So this initial breach for this big one occurred in May of 2014, and then it wasn't until May of 2015, a whole year later, that it was discovered. So the attackers had a whole lot of time to grab data off the system. And this is actually fairly normal. Attackers often have some kind of freedom of movement within a computer system after initial breach. And in many cases, this can last months or even a couple of years before it's noticed. And so this is why data privacy and security are such a big deal, because when people's information gets stolen, then the organization that suffered the breach, they have a responsibility to those people and to do things like, say, get them services to protect their identity, or pay them for the damages that they ensued due to the data being stolen. And so these are very important things to think about. So a couple of the major regulations, probably the biggest one that has the most global impact to date has been what's called GDPR. And this is the EU regulation to protect various types of personal sensitive data. And it was introduced and is designed to protect everything from healthcare data to criminal history and all that. And what's interesting to note here is this applies to all companies worldwide who collect and are in possession of data on European Union residents. So even if you're in an American company or an Indian company, if they're doing business with Europe, they have to consider this very significant regulation. Likewise, the state of California in the United States had followed suit, and they introduced their own analog to GDPR called the CCPA that is very similar in spirit, that also offers some additional protections for data collected by IoT systems on individuals, as well as also establishing rules for purchase and sale of that data. Other countries such as Canada and Australia have also introduced laws that are similar. So with GDPR, there are real fines that are imposed, and looking at the size of the fines, we see that they're often in the millions of dollars, and in some extreme cases, it even reached hundreds of millions of dollars. You also look at the total number of breach notifications that occurred here over a 4-year period, and they're not insignificant. So this is actively something that is policed by the Europeans, and it's a real thing. Notice also these charts. They came from a firm called DLA Piper, which is a law firm, and they use this in their advertising material because they want to support companies who potentially have this as a legal issue on their radar screen. So other important regulations in the U.S., there's what's called HIPAA, and this is regulation that governs healthcare data. So if you're working in a company that deals with any kind of patient data or health insurance data, chances are this is very important. And there's 2 rules within HIPAA that deal with data, and that is privacy, that focuses on protection of individual personally identifiable data regardless of the medium it's stored in, even if it's paper. And there's also this the security rule, and this focuses on cybersecurity measurements for electronic storage and transmission of the information. PCI DSS, this is not a law, but a regulation that is agreed upon within the financial industry, and many of the major financials, they got together and they set up this independent governing organization that enforces these rules. And so this deals with information particularly about credit card data. And so if you're working at a company that is retaining a lot of this data or analyzing it and so forth, likely they have to comply by the PCI regulations. And there are 6 categories dealing with their control objectives, and it deals with ensuring that any firm that's dealing with this kind of data has secure network systems, that they're protecting cardholder data, they're assessing the vulnerabilities in their systems. So this is also kind of an important thing from a machine learning ops perspective. You have certain databases or machine learning platforms that are commercially available, staying on top of that vulnerability management. Access control, monitoring and testing the networks, and also maintaining an information security policy. So it's really easy to identify if you have this kind of data because this consists of credit card and account data for the most part. Anyway, this concludes our lecture on data privacy and security. Stay tuned for more content.